Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, you got MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well, and what a week of fantasy footy it was. It was another one of those really long weeks, and if you're having a good week, you didn't want the weekend to end because everything was turning to gold. But golly gosh, if you had a shocker, whether it be some cows, some guys on the bench that were being covered for by cows, or Touk Miller, one of the more popular premium trade-ins last week, goes down with an injury, will miss some significant time. It was a painful week for some. There were lots of highs and lots of lows, but there is still plenty to talk about this episode. Want to talk some of our Patreon questions? We want to answer those. If you want to join our Patreon supporter group, all the links are in the description of this podcast episode. Want to talk about some value hunting and some names we can look at, maybe a strat for cash. We got to talk cash cows, both the tapping out of and the avenues that might be viable for us for downgrades. And then in a moment, we'll talk about Touk Miller. And as a byproduct of that, some premium players that are ripe for the picking right now. So if you are not got a Touk-shaped issue and looking to make an upgrade, some of the conversation we'll have around that will certainly help you. Joining me on this episode, as he has right since day one of the podcast, fellow co-founder Rids. Hello, mate. How are you?
Hey, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing better than Touk Miller's injury history right now. Let's say that. And also on this episode, Harry's back, ladies and gentlemen. It's MiniMonk. Hello, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. You haven't decided to park me at full forward, have you?
No, well, we might send a tag to you, but who knows, mate? It's a week-to-week proposition. All right, lads, there's a fair bit we want to get to. Let's talk about Touk Miller, and then as a byproduct, we'll talk about the premiums. But straight out of the gate, if you traded into Touk, which members of the panel on this podcast in different formats, we all did in at least one of the formats. Here's what I'll say to you before I hand it over to the boys to help you navigate some trade avenues. The thought process was right. Luck was not on your side, but the idea of trading into him based on his price, his history, your buy structure, all those elements, tick, tick, tick. At the end of the day, luck is one of the biggest variables in the game. And unfortunately for Touk owners, it wasn't a bad trade outside of using hindsight to make that call. Rather, it was just a little bit of bad luck that goes your way. However, when injuries come, opportunities come. And so MiniMonk, maybe first out of the gate, there are some that maybe see Touk as a way of not just getting to another premium, but maybe fixing up their side, potentially, and we'll talk about this player in more depth soon, a Will Day, and maybe going, I could go Miller down to Day, and I could get Wilmot off the ground, who drove me nuts, and I can get Johannisen. We'll talk about him soon. Before we look at the premiums, is that the type of play across formats we should be considering, or is he just a pure primo to primo move?
I think it's really tricky with someone like Miller because the temptation there is to try and say, well, I've lost a premium. I've lost someone who had a lot of cash in their head. Let me try and get a rookie up in the process because that's what all the other coaches are doing. And you'll fall behind if you don't. But I think that's looking at it a bit the wrong way. You've gotten Miller because not only did he have the buy, not only did he have the price, not only did he have the history, but he was also a captaincy option as well. When people are crying out for players that can push a 110, 115 ceiling on a regular basis and provide that stability for you to go in and say, right, I'm going to VC him or I'm going to see him this week. And going down to someone like Day doesn't provide me with a lot of confidence because yes, Day's been very good. Yes, he's playing an inside mid role, but I don't see him going 120 on a regular basis. I see him as, 100 guy if he performs at that and he keeps the same role after coming back, which is really good for where he's priced.
Yeah.
But he's not good for as a replacement for Touk Miller.
No, I think that's a fair call. So, Rids, if we're heading in premium territories, who are some of the names in just the midfield line that we should be considering? Are there any obvious if you don't have go-gets, or do we need to start getting a little bit creative?
So the first one we got to discuss. We have to discuss this name, okay? And I'm sorry for all the non-owners out there and everything else, but he's been amazing. since day one of this season, and his name's Clary Oliver. Okay,
He's a beast.
so if you don't have him, this might open up the opportunity to go straight to him, especially in SuperCoach, especially in Dream Team, and just park it.
Yeah.
Okay, you just grab it and go with it. Now, again, it's going to cost a little bit of money because unfortunately Touk's dropped a little bit with that score, but it might be worth the investment, especially with that Melbourne run coming up. So I just want to throw another name out here, though, quickly.
Please.
And Melbourne run I just spoke about, there's another guy. There's Robin out of the Batman and Robin duo that doesn't seem to be getting as much noise out of that, and that's Petrarca this year. So
CP5.
he's got just as much ceiling as Oliver does. And
Probably in Dream Team and Fantasy, that's fair. Supercoach, maybe not as regular, but he's got it in his wheelhouse for sure.
yeah, for sure. And like the thing is, if you want someone, just as long as he gets those CBAs and gets that role, I mean, he's been proven across the board as that. There's one more name that we should really discuss if we're looking at just pure premium mids.
Yep.
And that's a guy who started the year injured. He's just recently come back, and that's Sam Walsh. Sam Walsh, to me, is a great option because of his uniqueness. He's that sort of guy that's going to pound out. It doesn't matter about opposition with Sam Walsh. He just seems to hit that score all the time. He's just consistent. His ceiling's high. He's just got everything you want in a premium mid. So they're the three options I'd be just calling out straight out if you were looking at that.
Yeah, it's good. You alluded to that Melbourne run over the next month. They've got the Kangaroos this week, the Gold Coast Suns again without Touk. Sorry to rub it in. Hawthorn, and then a slightly more challenging one in Port Adelaide after that. But certainly outside of coming up against St Kilda, it's as good as a run as you could probably get from a midfield perspective. There are some other names there, Mini-Monk, I'm keen on your take. I know Rids is setting you up for a couple of them. Rory Laird, if you picked Laird over Oliver, it's probably one of those sliding door moments in your season. And Laird's been fine, by the way, outside of round one. Much like if you picked Young over Dacos, very sliding doors moment for your year. So is Laird another one of those considerations that should be in this conversational pie for future owners?
Absolutely he is. He's 100k cheaper than Oliver. So, if you're struggling for cash generation, or in AF, in SuperCoach, it's I think about 30 or 40k. In Dream Team, it's probably about 100k as well. So if you're struggling for cash generation, you want to get someone who is basically locked in to be a top 8 midfielder across the formats. And I think that's Laird. People will say, oh, he hasn't shown his ceiling yet. He hasn't shown his ceiling list. None of his matchups have been particularly friendly. He got a 140 odd, 150 odd across the formats in round 2 against Richmond. And then he had Port Adelaide, who are about the most restrictive team going around at the moment. Copped a bit of attention against Freo, and then has popped up a couple of reasonably good scores against Carlton and Hawthorn. And Hawthorn, despite how easy of a matchup they seem to be in terms of actually on the field, they're not that friendly of a matchup in fantasy.
I think they're the number one team in the league for clearances at the moment. So from a midfield perspective, they're doing just fine. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think Laird is one that people really should be looking at. If you're talking about unique options, someone like Zach Merritt as well, who's come down a bit in price and he's coming off his suspension. He'd be hungry to prove a point. I like the Sam Walsh talk. There's a lot of talk that Dacos is, now the best player in the league. Walsh might want to come out and say, well, I'm a pretty good player as well. Maybe I should have something to say about that being a number one pick also. And Bontempelli's come off a massive game against Freo, and the Dogs have a pretty friendly run up until their bye as well. He seems to be the main guy in that mix. So I wouldn't mind having a piece of any of those sorts of players. And the beauty about someone like Miller going out is it allows you to have your pick at who you want to go for, and allows you to a little bit to create your buy structure as well. Yeah. If you're really heavy on the round 14 buy, go around 15 premium. If you're really heavy on the round 15 buy, go for a round 14 premium. But try and find someone who's going to be a genuine captaincy option. All of those players that, myself and Rids have talked about just before, they're all players that I would feel very comfortable putting the vice captaincy or captaincy on most weeks. I
think it's interesting. There's a couple of guys that, of reasons why we traded into Touk, the value, the captaincy option, the history, the pedigree, all these kind of things. The buy round was definitely a lead indicator, especially for Dream Team and SuperCoach players, where that round 13 was still going to be a best 18 on field for us. And it was much easier to navigate that bye round with just Gold Coast and Geelong. You could navigate through that pretty easily. And all of a sudden, 12, 14 and 15, I think it is, as the bye rounds, you could kind of navigate your way through it a little bit more. So Riz, my question is this. There are some guys that have that bye round of Geelong and Gold Coast that might not be the perma captain or the VCC every week, but you've got guys like Noah Anderson, who in AFL Fantasy could be comparable from now till the end of the year in terms of what Touk gave us. Patrick Dangerfield in SuperCoach is coming off the back of 4 consecutive tons. And then in the back line, Tom Stewart, while certainly not a VCC guy in the same light that Miller is, does have the same sort of ceiling. So, Rids, is there some warrant to hold that bye round structure down and look at some of these names? Or is it the names that you've mentioned is really all we should consider?
No, so I wouldn't do it that way because, so I would be, and a lot changes in a week of fantasy football, as we know. Right now, we know there's a lot of round 12 premium mids. I'm talking Callum Mills. I'm talking Jack Steele. We're going to have some really cheap options very, very soon. Okay. So that's one of the big things. So the second big thing is if you land a Sam Walsh or those types that we spoke about a second ago with Bontempelli and everything else, that's fine. Then you can actually move a Setterfield to one of those round 12 guys as we hit the buys, if that's the way your team's set up. So we can actually jiggle that a little bit, okay? Yes, great. We got Touk because he was a captain option. Yeah. I don't think I would be comfortable going a Noah Anderson, and I definitely wouldn't be comfortable going a Dangerfield about 2 or 3 years past his prime. As a captain option.
Yeah. No, I think it's good.
There's a lot of people speculating about who's going to get the bump at Gold Coast. A lot of people are saying it's going to be Touk Miller being out. It's going to be Matt Rowell. It's going to be Brain Friorini. Might be David Swallow. We've got time. I think Touk Miller's going to be out for quite a long time. The club have said medium term.
I think it ain't before the buys that he's coming back.
It's not before the buys. And chances are, if you're getting onto one of these players, it's someone that you're going to hold through to about round 15 and then trade out the week after the buys ends because you want them to be playing through. So you got time to let it settle, figure out who to jump on. If it's Fiorini, he's probably not going to go up that much in price. If it's Noah Anderson, he's already pretty highly priced anyways. If it's Matt Rowell, you can probably jump on next week. Let the dust settle. And then make the decision about who you're going to jump on if you're going to jump on from someone from the Gold Coast. I think the only one that I would jump on to from that round 13 buy, if you don't have them now, is Tom Stewart. And that's because I think his price is about to come back up. That 14's dropping out of his cycle. He's got a run of games down at GMHBA. But again, I don't see him as a captaincy option. So I'm not sure if you're moving Touk Miller, it's the best to go to him.
Yeah, that's good. So if for someone that's not got a Touk dilemma, but is in an upgrade phase of their midfield, is there any other midfielder that we didn't touch on that you boys are worth, maybe not for everybody, because again, as Rids has so beautifully pointed out, and so is MiniMonk on this episode, there's buy structures to start to consider. There's things, we're only 5 or 6 weeks away now from really coming to the very edge of this challenging period where your rank really starts to get known after the buy rounds. Are there any other premium midfielders or premiums in other lines that coaches could be going, right, now is the time to jump on them? Or have we covered pretty much all of them at the moment? MiniMonk?
I think the big one that people are starting to look on, move on to is Cornelio. I think across the formats, his price has bottomed out and he's actually started to get into a bit of form now. And I think he's a really approachable one. I think Butters, again, he only got 88 on the weekend in AF and I think about a 90 odd in SuperCoach as well.
Yeah, 94, I think, yeah.
That game was super uncontested, which really doesn't suit him. And he flied home in that last quarter. He got coaches' votes as well, which is a really good sign. I think they're going to want to keep using him in that midfield mix as Wines has started to be phased out. Lyons had a really low time on ground, and Bogue's basically not seen any midfield minutes. So I think it's Rosie and Butters' midfield at this point.
Yeah, it's fair enough.
And then I think down back as the value options that we were talking about before is Stewart and Day.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're alluding to it a lot through this podcast early on so far, but I think there's going to be cash generation issues for a lot of teams in all formats. And so when you've got players that you think can be a top 6, let alone a top 10 in their line, and they're coming in at, 400K in SuperCoach and 700,000 AF and DT, you need to be getting into these players.
That's a good point. So, Rids, MiniMonk's already touched on it. I'm keen to unpack this. We've had some really nice cash cows this year, led by Harry Sheasel, who I want to have a sidebar conversation about him in a moment. But a lot of what happened last weekend that went wrong for coaches, outside of maybe the Miller injury, was a lot of our cows hit a handbrake hard, missed or only barely hit their break even, and now as a result are staring down that challenging spot of their break even is mostly beyond what their seasonal average is. Guys such as Jinby, Sheasel, it's probably unfair to Ashcroft, but he's not far off it. Mackenzie, Menzie, if you've managed to hold through there. Who else could you throw in there? Davey, Philippou, like really pretty much every cow we've looked to this year, with the exception of possibly Chandler, and even he is right on that ledge of it as well. So we've got 8 or 9 of our cows all hitting this interesting point, and the future doesn't look super rosy for our cash cows. So what do we do in this point, Rids, where a lot of our cows have hit peak price, potentially starting to leak cash? And while there are some guys that have nice break evens that we could look at this week, it does enter some risk territory for us. What's your take on the cash cow situation?
So the cash cows is always going to be a challenge as we move forward. Okay. At this point in the season, every cow that comes on board will be there now due to an injury, due to a change in the team structure, about how they roll their playing. And we can only just have a look at Seamus Mitchell, for instance. He came into Hawthorn. He has a halfback role. He shut down on Isaac Rankin last weekend.
Did a good job.
He did a very good job. And he actually played his role like no other. But until we see the Scrimshaws, the Brambles, and everyone else, the Days come back, the Wards come back, he's always going to have that question mark around his job security. Every single cow right now, and I know we've been talking about this in our chat a bit, smells vesty. Like, every single cow, even someone like Chincotta, who came in and was great last week, added a lot. He smells vesty if Sard's around. Like, it's going to
He might not even play, to be fair, if Sard's back.
Ryan Angwin, another one, smells vesty. Like, everyone smells vesty at this stage. Even last week when we were looking backwards, Matty Roberts, MJ out of Fremantle, like Johnson, every single one of them. So we're going to have this real dilemma now moving forward, because we want the guys who score the best. Like the Chincottas, there's no doubt in the world. I think he's got the highest scoring potential, which means he might be able to generate quicker cash. So you might only need 2 or 3 games to generate enough cash to be useful, rather than wanting an extended 4 to 5 games like others. But it's a real challenge, MJ. So my thing would be smart when you're upgrading.
Yeah. So
have a look at someone like a Baz Smith, okay, who's now a forward premium. All he has to do is show us something in his next game or two, and I think he's going to be the talk of the town in the forward lines, because he's cheap across the formats.
And be even cheaper in a fortnight.
Exactly, mate. Look at Andy Brayshaw. Like,
cheap in a fortnight.
If he shows us something in the next couple of weeks, Callum Mills, I mentioned it earlier, keep an eye on him. If he's getting his CBAs back and he's actually playing a really ball hunting game, although we're still going to have that question marks around what Longmire's going to do. But,
Sure.
you know, he's got to play the best player in the midfield, so surely. Like, I mean, it's not like they're in grand final form at the moment.
No.
Like, so we've just got to be really, really strategic. I would be hesitant at the moment, especially in Dream Team and SuperCoach, to go jumping on those guys that you don't think are really, you know, top 10 of their lines, because all we're doing is we're burning a trade to jump on a guy and then having to use a trade down and then a trade up to try and get him to a real premium. And we're going to start running out of trades in those formats due to that cash like generation question marks we got now.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I mean, in AF, coaches tried to get really creative last week with their trades. People were talking about JJ, who I think actually performed really well. And if coaches traded into him, I still think it was the right decision. But Chase Jones burnt a lot of coaches on the weekend. I think he scored 37. Cash generation is stunted, went up 22K. Coaches are probably looking to bail off of him right now. So you need to be really careful about the upgrade targets that you're going for. Targeting the value when it's there. And this is why I'm talking about the likes of Stewart, Day, and Butters, because these are all players that have shown it in the past or have shown it during the early parts of the season that they can be near the top of their line. And we're looking at players like Brayshaw that's coming down in price, like Petrarca that's coming a little bit down in price, like Bad Smith that's coming down in price.
Kelly's got a bit in there. Yeah, there's a bunch of them. Yeah.
Exactly. Use the good rookies while you have them. But then when one of those targets comes up and you can jump onto them using that good rookie, that's the time to burn a rookie like that. Like if you've got Jinby still, I know a lot of people held him in AF. When the time comes, trade him out, use him to get that top liner. Someone like Chandler, trade him out and use him to get that top liner then when they're at the bottom. Try and time your upgrades now, because the rookies that you're having on field are really going to be making the difference at the moment, because, you know, the difference between people scoring 2,000 and 2,200 in SuperCoach or 1,900 and 2,100 in AF this week, it wasn't really a lot of the premiums. It was actually the rookies that people had on field. Like if you had Hollins on field, if you had Chin Cotter on field, if you had Chandler, or you had Jinby on field, you felt a lot better than having the likes of Davey, Van Ruin, Cowan on field. Roberts. Exactly. I mean, I know you can't predict it. I know you can't predict the rookie roulette, but look at the matchups the rookies have coming and look at how they've scored in the past, because chances are, if they've scored pretty well in the past, they're probably going to maintain some sort of scoring in the future.
And MJ, I just want to jump in now, because I know there's been a narrative around getting the rookies off the field, rookies off the field. And that's led to a lot of discussion around a Chase Jones or a JJ last week. And even I've seen teams trading into both of them in the same week. Now,
from cows, yeah.
I'm a firm believer of the same thought process of trying to get the most stable. But if you've got the top line premiums that you've got full confidence on in getting those scores, then in combination with one of your really decent job security scoring options, and like, I mean, it might be a Hollins, it might be a Jinby, it might be a Chandler at this point in time, then often that's actually going to go better than trading into two mid prices. So if you can get to one of those premiums that makes you the most comfortable, there is nothing wrong with doing that. Like sometimes it actually works out to be really well. Unfortunately, last week, and I'm saying this now, Touk would have been considered in that space last week.
He would have been.
And like, that's just bad luck. Okay. That doesn't mean that that's a now a precedent set for everyone that you trade into.
Correct.
Like, if you're going to trade in and you got a good hunch and you're going to sleep better at night having a Rory Laird, a Sam Walsh, whoever it is, okay, go and get them if you can get them, because that's the time to grab them, because you just don't know what's going to happen next week. You don't know who's going to make a wrong tackle. You don't know what's going to happen now week to week.
Totally.
So try and bank those big scores if you can get to it.
Yeah, that's some really good advice. There's a guy that I think we've all been just in love with the season he's delivered for us over and above. No, I'm not talking about MiniMonk, although we've nicknamed him after him, Harry Sheasel, the rookie of the year from a fantasy perspective, and probably for the rising star. It's going to take some pretty impressive efforts from some other guys over the next 3 or 4 months to get him there. He's arguably at his peak price, arguably. He's probably not a priority trade for almost any coach. But for the coach that might be looking for the opportunity to get aggressive and make a trade, should we move Harry Sheasel on? It's a unique coach that might be in that spot, MiniMonk. Talk us through it.
Could we move him on? Of course. You can trade any player at any time if you want to. And a lot of people started to get nervous with Harry Sheasel. There was the report that he was training away from the main group, that he could be laid out, didn't eventuate. But Aaron Hall came in, he scored lower. So a lot of people go, ooh, Hall's come in, Sheasel's gone lower. That must mean that Hall's taken Sheasel's role. His scoring is going to continue to stay low. I'm not sure that narrative holds true, because if you watch that game, he copped a fair bit of attention from Holman.
Yep.
And he was going into that game fairly injured as well. So they probably used it as an opportunity to rest him through the game. Now, the question is, should you trade Harry Sheasel? And I think that actually goes back to what you were talking about in the lead into this question. Do you have any other bigger issues? If you have Touk Miller, you should not be trading Harry Sheasel. If you have, 6 or 7 rookies on the field, including Sheasel, you probably shouldn't be trading him as well. Yes, it looks really nice when you can get him up to, a Nick Dacos or a Rory Laird or a Clayton Oliver or a Tim Taranto with very little cash movement. But who are you putting onto your field to cover him at D6 or F6 in the process? That's really what you've got to be considering. Because even with that 47 in AF and 40 odd in DT, in SC from Sheasel, he's still averaging a ton.
Yeah.
As a rookie, and he's popped a 40 odd score. Yeah. Like, come on. If he is at the top of your priority list for trading out, then by all means, go for it.
You've got an amazing team and you're in great shape. Yeah.
Exactly. You would be, top 100, top 1,000 in the format, and you'd be absolutely loving life. And you're going, right, here's my time. Some coaches might see it as an opportunity to get aggressive. He's basically 100% owned in the top echelon of ranks across all the formats. And
sure,
that's more causation than it is correlation. You wouldn't be at that higher a rank if you didn't start him because of how much he's been in price per dollars. But that doesn't mean that this is the time to get aggressive. You could make the same argument about Nick Dacos. He's 100% owned, basically. You could make the same argument about Will Ashcroft. I mean, he could probably be, there's an argument more about trading Will Ashcroft for me than there is for trading Harry Sheasel. And that's because he's got 4 defender flexibility. His price is so high, but his price is high because he's shown he has that ceiling. And I just think that, unless you're in that absolutely glorious luxury position, you probably should just leave it for a week, see how the dust settles again.
So MJ, let me jump in.
Please.
Last week, North Melbourne played the Gold Coast Suns. Now, that was a toss of the coin game going into that game of football. We had Stuart Dew under the pump looking for, trying to make his jobs more secure.
Yeah, give himself a fortnight to breathe.
If they lose that, what happens? Touk Miller goes out and plays very accountable football on LDU from pretty much the first bounce. We're going to go see Holman go tackle Sheasel. I don't see that happening over the next 5 weeks for North Melbourne because they play Melbourne, then St Kilda, then Port Adelaide, then they go into Sydney, then they play Collingwood. Now, yes, there's possibilities that Sheasel's going to be getting a bit more attention because that happened last week and it helped them win the game of football in Gold Coast.
Sure.
Fact of the matter is, I don't think any of them are going to be having restless sleeps at night over Harry over the next 5 weeks.
No.
Okay, especially if it's junk football. And I say junk with the utmost respect to everyone in the AFL, but I'm talking about that chip-chop football around in the back lines.
Yeah, transition from flank to flank. And
anyone that actually was worried about Aaron Hall impacting Sheasel, please go back and watch the game of football. Yes, 100% there was some impact there, okay? But if anything, what Hall did was when he got onto the field, he put speed on that ball and there wasn't that chip, that junk stuff around the back line. Now, there's every chance that's going to impact Zeeble moving forward rather than Sheasel. So,
100%.
because we all have seen it, with Jack Zeeble. Like, the way he gets his scoring bursts is where they actually try and slow the ball down, and he chips it out sideways, chips it here, gets it back. So just watch the game of football. That's where Sheasel's going to come into his own when that comes back.
Yeah.
Let's say that Aaron Hall has a 20-point hit on Sheasel's average.
Sure.
Yeah. That takes him down from 110 to about a 90 average across the formats.
A disaster.
What a disaster to have a 90 averaging defender forward split player who has a ceiling when we've got rookies on the field.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at the likes of, I don't know, Will Setterfield, Andrew McGrath, Hayden Young, Errol Goulden, who have all popped relatively poor scores at some point during this season.
Yep.
Are we talking about trading a lot of those? Not at this point in time. But we are, because Shears was a rookie, because, it feels nicer to have that rookie off the field. But let's just say it. A 90 averaging defender forward, D7, F7, and SuperCoach and Dream Team, D6 and AF, holding up to the buys. It's fine. It's absolutely fine to hold him.
Yeah, I think it's a really fair shout. So we've alluded to a couple of these names that are value players throughout this episode, probably led by the return of suspension of Will Day. Definitely, alongside of a bunch of others, was one of the picks of the year for those that had him in their starting squad. Definitely a guy that really created early separation in terms of ranks. And by the way, I want to talk about ranks for coaches in a little bit as well. He's back, averaging around that 100 marker across the formats, and probably priced, 20 points lower than what he's delivering in terms of his price point. So I'm curious on your thoughts, and it might be different, lads, across all the formats. Rids, we'll start with you. Is Will Day someone, now those that benched him, this is an irrelevant conversation, but those that either wanted him or traded him out and want to get him back in, is he a viable trade-in play across the formats, or is it now only head to the top of the tree sort of options?
No, well, it all depends on the view of the coach, okay? So if the coach sees Day as a D6 option from now to the end of the year, I'm talking more specifically for DT and SuperCoach right now,
sure,
then 100% he's a viable option. Because not only is he a value represented D6 option from now to the end of the season, he also opens up the possibility of trading a Sheasel to another line premium later on down the road. So he does serve a purpose there. The only thing I would actually throw out to people, though, is if you're trading into Will Day, have a look at your buy structure.
Yeah,
now,
round 14.
Dacos, Dawson, if you've got Sicily or you've got any thoughts about getting a Sicily type, and you're trading into a Will Day as well, you may be causing yourself a little bit of heartache at some stage over the next few weeks.
Well, and that's just in the backline, Rids, let alone through the midfield, where you likely want to or will have at least one of Oliver and Petrarca. Rory Laird's a part of that buy structure around Zach Merritt, maybe a bit more unique, but definitely, as MiniMonk alluded to, is someone we could be considering. So even just in those lines alone, we could be really hitting some heat to hit 18 through these buy rounds. It's good.
So in AF, I was just going to finish off in AF. Now, we spoke last week about a Butters, potentially being a buy candidate, hold to buy and then trading off him. There's no reason why Day can't be that as well in AF. So there is possibilities of you trading into him, not so much worried about your buys for now, because your plan will be, whoever the worst case is, I'm going to trade around them and sideways to whoever has their buys, like when his buy does appear. So that's the only thing I wanted to raise there.
It's good.
Yeah. Just a word of caution when doing that. Make sure you're not holding too many of those guys, because chances are you're going to want to be trading a couple of dead rookies at that point. And so if you've got 3 of those, let's call them underpriced premiums that don't quite work out, that you're needing to trade at that buy round, that's when you want to be considering maybe not going for Will Day. But if you've got, maybe Zach Butters at F5, F4, and you've got a space in your round 14 buy for someone like Will Day, then yeah, it's a viable play on. But yes, as Rid said, watch what your buy structure is like, because a lot of people are ending up to be very heavy in that round 14 and round 15 buy. And I think in that process, you need to be looking at who am I wanting to trade in at round 12 or round 13 when they're coming off of their buy, because we don't have that many to pick from. You've only got 4 teams to pick from to jump on to off of that round 12 buy. You've only got 2 more that come in off of that round 13 buy. So knowing which players you want to be moving on to then is also very important.
Yeah, it's good. Rids, an interesting thing as we're talking about the buy rounds is we're talking about these players on the field and making sure our structures are right and getting to hopefully, at the very least, 18 players on field through these multi-buy rounds where it's 18 count, but ideal, obviously, is to be able to push out some of those poor cow scores or premium scores to maximize the potential. What's not probably getting as much talked about through the buy structure is we've got some dead cows alongside that. We've got someone, unfortunately, like a Matt Roberts, who I thought looked quite good in the game. Now, again, was red vest candidate regardless, but looked quite good in this game. Campbell Chesser's still a few weeks away at best. Miller Bergman, probably not as popular, but he's floating around in a couple of people's lines as well. These are just a couple of the names that we could use, but outside of just these premiums and structures, we've also got in some sides, and then you've got your R3 probably for a lot of teams as well. That's a Heath type or a McAdam type or something like that.
And don't forget Charlie Constable as well, especially in SuperCoach and DreamTeam.
Yeah, where is it? So what do we do with this structure of this rush to upgrade our teams, challenging cows of job security, and the vest is making it a unique year in contrast to the past handful, and more red dots than what most coaches would probably like to have. I don't know many that have less than 2 red dots across their benches. Some have 4 or 5, which is really alarm bells. What's that challenge of dilemma like over these next 6 weeks? What should we be processing and thinking about addressing?
Well, the first thing I don't like is a double downgrade for a start or a sideways trade of a rookie to a rookie, especially in SuperCoach or DreamTeam if they're on the bubble. So if you look at Charlie Constable, for instance, now you might have thought it would have been a good move to move a Charlie Constable who wasn't playing on the bubble, sitting in whatever, to a Matty Roberts type. But the problem is they were always a vest candidate. Don't worry the injury that happened and everything 100%. Else. That was bad luck, okay, the injury part. Agree. But the thing is, everyone's been saying it since day one. Everyone's been uncomfortable around how they smell. And that could be the starting vest, the red vest, to finish the game. But works both ways. So you've just got to make sure you're trading very, very wisely. And my thing would be, especially in SuperCoach and DreamTeam, only trade a rookie that you need the cash for when you can get a serious upgrade with the other trade. Now, whether that's a boost, whatever it is.
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, it's really important, those rookies, to make those 18 numbers across the buys round to round. So we're going to be really have to be really careful, because we saw last week, MJ, like we had teams with Green sitting on the bench and with Day on the bench.
Merritt as well.
A lot of people may very well have had Wilmot covering. They may have had Roberts covering.
Johnson.
You could have that for 2 buy rounds in a row if you're not really careful. Because just because you've got the numbers of 20, have a look at what that makeup is. Is it your premiums? Is it your rookies? Are they actually likely to be playing in that buy round? Because like Charlie Constable's going to come up as a number for round 12, round 14, round 15. So you might luck into it.
Sure.
That he may get named. But the thing is, you shouldn't be banking on him getting named.
Yeah, some good advice. MiniMonk, any more thoughts on that?
I think in SuperCoach and DreamTeam, this might be where the boost this year is being underutilized, because I think holding a boost into the buy rounds is going to be a massive play for those coaches who can. I'm specifically talking about the round 14 and round 15 buys, when you can get up to 4 trades, when you've got 6 teams that are missing that week, and you might be able to be cute and shuffle a premium or shuffle a mid-price or shuffle a rookie that week and get to 20 or 21 playing when other coaches might only have the bare bones 18 and cop a very low score from a rookie. I would seriously be considering that, especially if you've got probably 3 or more boosts at this point, because chances are you're going to need to use another couple to get an upgrade done between now and the buys. But if you can hold round for that round and have a few trades in the bank to be able to do that, could be a ticket to going from 5,000 to 2,000 in that week, or 500 to 200. In AF, it gets a bit trickier though.
Yeah.
Because we're always talking about upgrade cadence. We're always talking about how you need to stay with the pack. Unfortunately, some coaches got stuck with Touk Miller and he got injured.
Yeah, that sets you back a couple
It's really
of weeks.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
But you've still got to try and maintain pace with the group despite that. And doing, as Rid said, a double rookie fix this week in order to try and solve that issue, that puts you behind. You might say, yeah, I might get a better premium next week, but you know, if you're targeting a premium that's in that 700K bracket and someone can get 2 of them versus you getting a 900K one, chances are the person that gets a couple of 700K guys wins out in the long run.
Yeah, well, you're talking about you
week.
lost the 50 points last week, potentially 100 points of this week, and then by that coming weeks, you might be losing 10 points every single week. All of a sudden, you're now down 500 points off one move.
Exactly. And whilst there's a lot of concern from coaches coming into the buy rounds, we do have those 6 trades through the 12 and 13 buys where people aren't massively, stacked. There is the opportunity to be able to fix some of those rookies then. There might not be the rookies to jump onto then, but that could be an opportunity to fix them. You look back at last year, we had the Essendon forward. He played, I think, 1 game and he was 1 and done.
Yeah, Baldwin.
I remember him. Yeah, Baldwin. He was a nice one that you could move at the buys, but nobody looked to move him before the buys. And that might be the case with someone like Constable. It might be the case with someone like Chesser, who could still come back. Yep. Might be the case with someone like Roberts, is that you wait until that point and you go, right, I can flick him at 12 because I've got no other issues. I can move him to someone that actually is playing and I got a bit more cover through the buy rounds. So don't try and force the rookie fixes now, because it's going to probably put you behind too far.
Yeah, that's good. Before we get to some of our Patreon question, which we're jumping over a ton of them through this episode because they're all Touk Miller related questions. So our advice to our Patreons is like, who do you like? Go back and listen to the first half of a dozen minutes or so, because that'll answer to you who the boys like for it. But I want to talk about ranks, and maybe it's nice to mention it off the back of a Touk Miller. It does set people back in their rankings, not just the 50, 80 points or 150 points they might have lost if they'd captained him or not. So yeah, absolutely an unfortunate step back. But Rids, a lot of this point of the year is sliding doors, 50-50 decisions that has decided people's fates. We alluded to it earlier. If you started Dacos over a Young, if you started a Clayton Oliver over a Laird, you started a Caleb Sarong over another mid-pricer, you started a Will Day over an Andrew McGrath. We could do dozens of these to highlight the point. But as a result, you might find yourself in the top 100 or 1,000 or 2, because you got a bunch of those right in the first week or 2. Whereas if you've had other issues, and there have been some unlucky injuries to some premium guys, to some mid-price guys, there's been some suspensions, and they find themselves ranked in the teens of thousands or 20,000s, maybe even a little bit further back with some further poor luck. How much currency should we put into ranks right now? And if we do put our currency in ranks in terms of how we value ourselves as a coach, not so much what we think of them right now, what's some advice for you two, from you two boys, to help coaches kind of get from where they are to where they'd like to be? So Rids, maybe on that first thought, how much do you give a stuff about what you're ranked at right now?
No, I definitely like to be ranked well, because it's always nice to know that you've seen it well, you've had a bit of luck and everything else. But there is a flip side to that. You might actually be going okay and your team's actually in a good spot, but you just haven't nailed your rookie roulette or your captaincy options for a few weeks. And that actually impacts your ranking early days more so than when you get deeper into the season. Yeah. This is why I never overstate ranks. Yes, it's great for it now. Okay. Absolutely. You know, when I was lucky enough to go well in Dream Team a couple of years ago, I think I hit the number 1 spot in about round 7 from memory. And then I pretty much held it for the rest of the year. So there is ways that you can do that. I know there was a few guys, I think Matty last year in AF hit it number 1 for months, and then held it for a long, long time. And I remember cheering him home, like watching it, like, because it's really unheard of at times. But the thing is, okay, it's very rare, okay, that actually happens. You don't need to be, whilst you want to be within striking distance, you don't need to be up the top echelon. Like sometimes the unique options that I think, especially in AF, what I've noticed this year more so than anywhere else, is if you stick with the pack and you just go the vanilla cookie cutter option of what the pack is doing, but with a bit of nous about it, you can actually be ranked pretty high right now. And then what happens is when the season gets deeper and you start upgrading to the more unique value options, like, and I'm talking about the guys where uniques pods really make a difference, okay? Yeah. You know, and we see every year there's someone that flies home late and they always impact the rankings more than anyone else for the rest of the year. Sure. And I think Rory Laird was a perfect example of that last year. He absolutely flew home last year. Yep. And if you didn't own him, it didn't matter if you were ranked 100th or 10th or 1st in the first part of the season. If you didn't own Rory Laird when that run hit, you were bye-bye. Your ranking blew. You know, so that's why I don't put too much emphasis on it. I'd be more worried about your team structure. How are you looking? Like, how many trades have you got left? How many premiums do you need to upgrade to a completed team? And don't get caught out with the narrative, because in 3 or 4 weeks' time, when people start getting pretty much every rookie off the field in certain formats like AF or whatever else, they're going to start telling you that they're completed their team. Okay. No, pretty much they've only completed the first phase of it. Correct. Because you've moved rookies off and you've just got them off the field. Then the next phase comes in of generating cash to get those mid-price to actually complete your team properly. So try and be smart about it, okay?
It's good. It's good advice.
Like people were saying last week, I've got 2 rookies off the field. I brought in Jason Johannesson and Chase Jones.
And 90 combined. Yeah.
Yes. And that happens. Like some of those players that you can bring in, they can score like that. Sometimes they do score really well, but sometimes they can score like a rookie as well. So whenever you see people saying, oh, I've only got 3 rookies on field, oh, I've only got 5 rookies on field, bearing in mind they might have, you know, worse premiums, worse mid prices, might be fielding poor rookies, comes out in the wash in the long run. I think there was a statistic going around in one of the podcasts earlier in the week. In AF specifically, there was someone who was ranked, I think, nearly 30,000 at this point of the season that still finished in the top 1,000 in AF. It's assuming exactly the same thing could happen in SuperCoach, and in DreamTeam, it's probably a bit different due to the less number of people playing, but you could still easily climb up the ranks. I think it was a couple of years ago, Lemon DT came back from about 5,000s to finish 3rd in AF. There was a couple of 100 points in total between something like 1,000 and 10,000s in AF.
Yeah, it's very close.
It's probably the same in SuperCoach. It's probably the same in Dream Team. And that's really a couple of captaincy calls, a couple of rookie calls on field. But these things come out in the long run. Like we call it rookie roulette for a reason, because it's a roulette table. Some weeks you win, some weeks you lose, but in the end, everyone comes out roughly even. So when you're making your upgrades, keep focusing on the same things. Focus on, am I targeting the right premium? And I'm trading the right rookies? And it'll come out in the long run. Build your team value, get the right players, and then you'll come flying home in the back half of the season. So ranks now do help. if you're up near the top of the ranks, don't say, oh, I might fall back down, because chances are you've probably done a lot of things right. Keep making those right decisions. If you got a bit of a poorer rank, don't stress. You could easily come back to a good rank from here.
It's good.
And I just wanted to call out one more name as well with that
Please.
as well, and that's Cozzy Pickett. Now, we saw in SuperCoach, especially last week, like Cozzy Pickett, and we heard about the CBAs and everything in the preseason. He came out with a 16 last week, MJ.
Yeah.
Like, we had Van Ruin come out with an 80, and we had Chandler come out with another 80 score as well.
Yeah.
Now, just because you've got that rookie off the field doesn't mean that you're banking points from
More
it.
points. Yeah.
Okay, and that's what I'm sort of saying. Like, you got to be really clever about this. Grab the guys you 100% want in your team, the premiums, right now, because this is the time when you can optimize that. And then you can look at the value options later to fill those lines.
Yeah, it's good. Well, you talked about these guys that get that nice plump run roll on the way home and absolutely tear it up. Aaron Hall from a few years ago was one of those sort of guys. Long-term players, remember, Toby McLean had that sort of role for a long time. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that.
And Tom Rockcliffe was one. Remember,
Tom Rockcliffe,
before he became the pig or whatever they called him?
Pierce Hanley,
there's
heaps of them every year.
One year he went home at 130 and he just sort of popped from nowhere. But every year we see these examples.
Yeah, it's a good shout. Want to answer some of our Patreon questions before we wrap up? Like I said, probably 90% of them, and there's a lot, I've got Touk Miller. Who should I trade? This is my suggestion. Again, go back and listen to the front 10 minutes of the episode. It'll help you out through there.
I'll help you out, MJ.
Yeah,
if
please.
you own Touk Miller, you should be trading out Touk Miller. Okay.
Thank you, Ritz. That's really, really helpful advice. I'll quote that and I'll get that up on our social media tiles for everyone. So a couple of questions for you boys. JP Fam 3, a SuperCoach question for you, MiniMonk. He says, is it too early to trade out Chandler? My intention this week is to move on Chandler and Wilmot and get Day and Chincotta via DPP. I like the upgrade of Day, but do you like the way he's getting there via Chandler?
I'm a bit hesitant about trading Chandler in SuperCoach, especially because you saw what he did against Richmond. He got an 85 in SuperCoach. I mean, it's a pretty good score to be having at F6. Have a look at what Melbourne have in the next three. We were talking about it before with Clayton Oliver and Christian Petrarca.
North Melbourne, Hawthorn, Gold Coast. Yeah.
I mean, he's the type of player. He's a small pressure forward who leads up the ground, can get involved in +6 chains, kick mark, kicks goals out the back. He's the type of player you want to field at F6 for a few weeks. So yeah, I really like getting Day in, but I wouldn't do it at the expense of Chandler. And I also wouldn't do it by bringing in Chincotta this week. I know that he's popped a really good score, but he's not on the bubble. And if he doesn't make it to his third game, if he doesn't make it to that price range change, it's exactly the same as having someone like Constable there. It's just another dead defensive mid rookie who you don't know when they're going to come in and who doesn't provide much service for you. So yeah, get to Day if you want to, but try and find another way there.
Yeah, I really like that. Guy's got a AFL fantasy question for you, Rids. He's got 406,000 in the bank. Yikes, that's some cash, Guy. Well done, mate. He's got Grundy at R2 with Marshall at R1. The return of Gawn has him wanting to go and get Grundy out, and he's considering English, but it's going to cost him 213k. Is it worth paying up for Tim English, who's now setting himself at 1.02 million, Rids?
That's an impossible question to answer without seeing the rest of your team, without knowing all of the broken bits, without knowing who you've got. But if your team's in a good spot, okay, and you've got a lot of rookies, you've got a bit of cash around the place, but I would be questioning how you've got that money in the bank anyway for a start. But if you can get to English, of course, you just go straight to English, okay? Don't muck around in the rucks. Just do it. English has proven. But if your buy structures allow you to trade into a Sean Darcy, he's looking actually pretty good lately. It's just that he's playing against Tim English season, you know? That's the difference between the two. But I don't know what the buy structure is. You're going to have to look at it and try and work out who fits your buy structure best. But if it's Tim English, then 100% go grab him. Don't be scared about the dollar value because he's a captain option now.
Yeah.
Well, in AFL Fantasy, he hasn't dropped under 110 all year. In SuperCoach, not that you're playing that guy, but he hasn't gone under 130. He's arguably the safest VCC option across the formats at the moment. He's one of only a handful of guys that hasn't done it.
But MJ, he's also highly owned in the top 1,000 of AF.
No separation, correct.
Okay, so get that parity, take away the lack of that 20, 30-point swing to them every week, get level, and build your unique matchups elsewhere.
Yep, I don't mind that. Last question from Sriram, because again, a lot of the questions are Touk Miller. So it's not, there's only 3 questions. There's dozens, but they're all Touk Miller questions. So my last one I'll throw to you, MiniMonk from Sriram. AFL Fantasy question. He made what he's calling the undisciplined move and traded into Chase Jones. So his question is, do I abandon ship now and trade up? He reckons he can get someone in the back line in that $700,000 to $800,000 range. Thousand, that is, not dollars, singular. Who are maybe 2 names you could consider in that range? Maybe 3 if you've got them, and just help him eliminate a few of the options in case he's got them.
The 2 that I had been talking about earlier on in the podcast, Will Day and Tom Stewart, are the 2 that I would be going if I'm going straight back. But if you're wanting to go a bit unique, I heard this mentioned last week, and I think this is a really interesting pod play. It's Dan Houston.
Ooh.
Porter coming into a very, very friendly run for halfback distributors. Houston's put together a few good games, and his price is in that low 700s range. So if you're looking to go for a bit of a pod, that's where I'd be looking. But if you're wanting to play it straight bat, I think Day and Stewart are your obvious options.
And the other thing is, I think Kane Farrell is actually injured right now. So.
He is. Yeah, he's missing this week.
All the more reason.
And has round 15 bye. So again, in AFL Fantasy, if you wanted to run him to the bye, use one of your multiple trades in that as a guy to jump off, and all of a sudden you can trade into any of those round 14, 13, 12 guys you like. I think that's not a bad shout from you lads. You boys have been sensational on this episode. Lots of advice for coaches. It's a fascinating round for people. Some feel like they're just patching some holes in the Titanic. Others feel like they're just spinning in circles, while some are feeling like they're making steps towards it. Everyone's in different spots, but hopefully you've been able to draw out some of the gold from these boys throughout this episode. MiniMonk, as always, an absolute pleasure, my friend.
The pleasure's all yours.
It is
mine. One way or the other.
No, it's yours. Yep. I get to be around the great Harry of fantasy footy. I'll take it. And Rids, it is my pleasure and MiniMonk's pleasure to be around you too, mate.
And just remember, mate, for everyone, if you've owned Touk Miller, bad luck happens, but this creates an opportunity now to go out and actually trade into someone more unique and have a bit of fun about it.
Yep, love that. Nice way to wrap up the episode. If you want to become a part of our Patreon supporter group, all the details are in the description of this podcast. There's articles dropping all the time at coachespanel.tv. And of course, you can keep across our social media of Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It's just at Coaches Panel. Every time there's breaking news, we make sure we bring it to you as quick as we possibly can. Good luck as you head into this upcoming round of fantasy footy. We hope it's kind to you yet again. Or maybe for the first time in a long time, some things go your way. Good luck, and we'll chat to you soon. From us at the Coaches Panel, we wish you well.